Melody Garcia wiped down the counter of the Blue Moon Diner for the 5th time that hour. The white cloth moved in slow circles over the blue speckled surface. There were no crumbs to clean. No customers had come in for 3 hours. But cleaning kept her hands busy and her mind quiet. Outside the large windows, the Montana sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. Beautiful, but empty. No birds flew anymore. The streets were too quiet. It had been this way since the Vraxians came 5 years ago. Melody looked at the clock on the wall. 7:30. Another hour until closing time. She doubted anyone else would come in. Most humans had left Earth on the colony ships. Those who stayed lived under Vraxian rules. The most important rule was silence. The old jukebox in the corner sat unplugged. Melody remembered when it used to play songs all day long. Customers would put in quarters and dance between the tables. Her grandmother had taught her all the old songs. Songs that were now against the law. "You okay there, Melody?" Frank, her grandfather, called softly from the kitchen doorway. His voice never rose above a whisper these days. "I'm fine, Grandpa," she said. "Just thinking." Frank nodded and went back to the kitchen. He was the reason she stayed on Earth when her parents and brother left for the Mars colony. At 78, he had refused to leave the town where he was born. Too old to start over on some space rock, he had said. So Melody stayed too. The bell above the door chimed softly. Melody turned, surprised to have a customer this late. Her heart jumped when she saw the tall, gray figure that entered. Vraxian, the alien had to duck to enter the doorway. Its skin was smooth and gray like river stones. It wore the black uniform of a military officer with silver badges on the collar. The large, lidless eyes blinked sideways as they adjusted to the diner's lights. Melody stood up straight and kept her face blank. "Good evening," she said in the flat tone all humans used when speaking to Vraxians. "Please sit wherever you like." The Vraxian moved to a booth far from the windows. They always avoided sitting near glass, something about sound vibrations. Melody walked over with a menu, moving as quietly as possible. The Vraxians had come to Earth because of their special hearing. They could hear sounds humans could not, and loud sounds hurt them badly. That was why they banned music first thing after they took over. "Water, please," the Vraxian said in a voice like dry leaves. All Vraxians spoke softly. Their large throats made their English sound strange, but clear. Melody poured water into a plastic cup. No ice. The sound of ice cubes was too sharp for Vraxian ears. She placed it on the table with a napkin and a straw. "Are you ready to order, or do you need more time?" she asked. "I will have the vegetable soup," the Vraxian said. "And bread." Melody wrote it down and walked to the kitchen. "1 vegetable soup and bread for table 6, she told her grandfather. "It's a Vraxian." Frank frowned. "They usually don't come this far out of town. Must be a patrol." He began ladling soup into a bowl. Melody leaned against the counter while she waited. "The town meeting is tomorrow. Do you think they'll close us down?" Frank shook his head. "They need some places to stay open for the humans who work for them. And they like our food." He placed the bowl on a tray with 2 slices of bread. "Here you go. Remember, set it down gently." Melody carried the tray back to the Vraxian's table. She placed everything down without a sound, the way she had learned. The Vraxian nodded at her. "Is there anything else I can get you?" she asked. "No. Thank you." She walked back to the counter and resumed cleaning. The Vraxian ate slowly, taking small bites and chewing carefully. They all ate like that, quiet and careful in everything they did. The door chimed again. Melody looked up to see Mrs. Weber, one of the few neighbors who still lived nearby. The old woman nodded at Melody and sat at the counter. "Coffee, please," Mrs. Weber whispered. "Black." Melody poured the coffee and slid it across the counter. Mrs. Weber glanced at the Vraxian, then back at Melody. "Any news about the supply truck?" she asked quietly. "Should be here Monday," Melody replied. The supply trucks came once a week now, bringing food and basic needs to the few stores still open. Mrs. Weber drank her coffee in silence. The diner was so quiet Melody could hear the clock ticking. Once, the blue moon had been full of talk and laughter. Now it felt like a library. When the clock showed 8:30, Melody began her closing routine. Mrs. Weber had left. The Vraxian remained, watching her with those strange eyes. "We close at 8:30, she said politely. The Vraxian stood up and placed payment on the table. "Thank you for the meal." Melody nodded and continued wiping down tables. The alien left, the bell chiming softly behind it. With the diner empty, Melody locked the front door and turned the sign to closed. Frank had already cleaned the kitchen and gone upstairs to their apartment above the diner. Alone in the quiet room, Melody felt the weight of silence pressing down. She missed music so much it hurt sometimes. Before thinking, she began to hum, softly while cleaning. It was an old song her grandmother loved, something about blue moons and love. The humming filled the empty space. For a moment, the diner felt like it used to, warm and alive. She closed her eyes, letting the gentle tune flow through her. A sharp tap on the window made her freeze. The Vraxian officer stood outside, watching her through the glass. It had heard her humming the forbidden music. Melody's heart pounded. Making music was punished severely. She had heard stories of humans taken away for singing or playing instruments. The Vraxian pointed to the door. Melody walked over slowly and unlocked it, her hands shaking. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to." "Do it again," the Vraxian said. Melody blinked. "What?" "The sound you were making. Do it again." The Vraxian's voice was still quiet, but there was something different in it. Not anger. Something like wonder. "I can't. It's not allowed," Melody said. "Please." The Vraxian said. The word sounded strange coming from the alien. "I am Lieutenant Krev. I study human sounds. What you were doing. I need to understand it." Melody looked at the Vraxian's face. Lieutenant Krev did not look threatening. He looked curious. "It was just humming," she said. "A song my grandmother taught me." "Song," Krev repeated. "The organized sounds humans make. Our leaders say it is how you train for war." Melody almost laughed. "No. Songs are for happiness or sadness, for telling stories, not for war." Krev's head tilted slightly. "Show me." Quietly. Melody glanced at the windows, making sure no one was passing by. Then, very softly, she hummed a few notes of the song. Krev's eyes widened. The Vraxian stood very still listening. When Melody stopped, Krev blinked several times. "It does not hurt," the alien said, sounding surprised. "Small sounds like this should hurt Vraxians. But this feels different." "That's because it's music," Melody said, "not just noise." Krev looked at her with those strange eyes. "I will return tomorrow. We will talk more about this music. Tell no one." Before Melody could answer, the Vraxian left, disappearing into the darkness outside. Melody locked the door again, her mind racing. A Vraxian interested in music? It seemed impossible. Yet something had happened tonight that felt important, maybe even dangerous. She turned off the lights and headed upstairs, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Melody woke early the next morning, her mind still on the strange meeting with Lieutenant Krev. She had not told her grandfather about it. Better to keep quiet until she understood what the Vraxian wanted. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to prepare the diner for the day. Frank was already in the kitchen, mixing batter for the few pancakes they could make with their limited supplies. "Morning, Grandpa," Melody said, tying her apron around her waist. "Sleep well?" Frank asked, not looking up from his work. "Well enough," she lied. In truth, she had stayed awake for hours, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake by humming in front of the alien. The morning passed slowly. A few regular customers came in for breakfast, all humans who still lived nearby. They spoke in whispers, exchanging small bits of news. The town meeting had been moved to next week. The water supply would be shut off for 2 hours tomorrow for testing. Normal talk in their not normal world. Melody kept glancing at the door, expecting Lieutenant Krev to return at any moment. But the morning turned to afternoon with no sign of the Vraxian. Maybe it had been a trick. Maybe Krev was reporting her right now. Melody's hands shook slightly as she refilled the salt shakers. The punishment for breaking sound laws was public, shaming at best, removal to a work camp at worst. The bell above the door chimed at exactly 2 o'clock. Melody looked up to see Lieutenant Krev enter, alone as before. The Vraxian wore the same black uniform but seemed different somehow, less stiff perhaps. Krev took the same booth as yesterday, far from the windows. Melody walked over, notepad in hand. "Good afternoon," she said, keeping her voice flat and professional. "What can I get for you today?" "Vegetable soup again," Krev said. Then lower. "And information about music." Melody wrote down the order and went to the kitchen, her heartbeat faster, so it had not been a trick after all. Krev really wanted to know about music. When she returned with the soup, the diner was empty except for them. Frank had gone to the storage room to check supplies. Krev waited until she placed the bowl on the table. "Sit, please," the Vraxian said, gesturing to the seat opposite. Melody hesitated, then sat down. Up close, she could see tiny patterns in Krev's gray skin, like fingerprints, but all over. "Why are you interested in music?" she asked quietly. Krev stirred the soup without eating. "I am part of the research division. We study humans to understand your ways." "To find better ways to control us," Melody said before she could stop herself. The Vraxian's eyes blinked sideways. "To understand," Krev repeated. "My division believes there is more to human sound patterns than our leaders claim." "What do your leaders claim?" "That humans use organized sounds, music, as training for war. That you force yourselves to endure painful frequencies to build resistance to our sound weapons." Krev looked at her directly. "Is this true?" Melody almost laughed again. "No. Music doesn't hurt us. It's beautiful. It makes us happy, or helps us when we're sad." "But how?" "Sound at certain frequencies should cause pain to any living being with ears." "Not to us. Not when it's music." Melody tried to think of how to explain. "It's like food. Random ingredients thrown together might taste bad, but the right ingredients, mixed the right way, make something good." Krev seemed to consider this. "We evolved differently. On our world, sound was always a danger. Our hearing developed to protect us from sound predators, creatures that used sound waves to hunt. This was more than Melody had ever heard about. The Vraxians, they rarely shared information about themselves. "So you turned sound into a weapon," she said. "Yes. We learned to control what had harmed us. When we discovered other worlds, we found our sensitivity gave us advantage." Krev lowered his voice even more. "But some of us wonder if there is more to sound than just weapons." Melody glanced around to make sure they were still alone. "What do you want from me, Lieutenant Krev?" "Show me more music. The quiet kind, like yesterday. I want to understand why humans value it so much. It was dangerous. If anyone reported them, they would both be punished." But Melody felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. If a Vraxian could understand music, maybe things could change. "Tonight," she whispered. "After closing. Come to the back door." Krev nodded and began eating the soup. Melody stood up and returned to her work, trying to act normal even as her mind raced with plans and fears. The rest of the day passed slowly. Frank noticed she was distracted but didn't ask why. At 8:30 they closed as usual. Frank went upstairs early, complaining of tired feet. "I'll finish cleaning up," Melody told him. "You rest." Once alone, she unlocked the back door and waited. At exactly 9 o'clock, there was a soft knock. Krev slipped inside, looking around carefully. "We must be quiet," Melody said. "My grandfather is upstairs." She led the Vraxian to the kitchen, the farthest point from the upstairs apartment. There she took a deep breath and began to hum softly. The same song as before, about blue moons and love. She kept it very quiet, barely audible. Krev stood completely still, eyes half closed. When Melody finished, the Vraxian remained frozen for several seconds. "How does it make you feel?" she asked. "Strange," Krev said. "Not pain, but movement inside, like water rippling." "That's good. That's how music should feel." Melody smiled. "A little. We call those feelings emotions. Vraxians have emotions too," Krev said, "but we control them tightly. Emotions lead to loud noises." "Not always. Sometimes emotions are quiet." Melody thought for a moment. "Can you show me how Vraxians use sound?" Krev hesitated, then made a series of soft clicking sounds with his tongue against teeth. The pattern was complex, rising and falling in pitch. "Communication code," Krev explained, "for quiet battlefield talk." "That's almost like music too," Melody said. "It has rhythm and changing tones." "This is not weapon sound," Krev said, seeming surprised at the comparison. "Maybe there's not such a big difference between our species after all," Melody suggested. "Maybe we just use sound differently because of where we evolved." Krev was quiet for a long moment. "Tomorrow I will bring something to show you, from Vraxian history." Before Melody could ask what, they heard footsteps overhead. Frank was moving around upstairs. "You should go," she whispered. Krev nodded and moved silently to the back door. Before leaving, the Vraxian turned to her. "Thank you, Melody Garcia. Your sound patterns are educational." After Krev left, Melody locked the door and leaned against it, heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. She was teaching a Vraxian about music. It seemed impossible, dangerous, and somehow important all at once. Upstairs, she found her grandfather sitting in his old armchair. "Everything locked up?" he asked. "Yes, Grandpa." Frank looked at her closely. "You seem different lately. Something happening I should know about?" Melody thought about telling him everything. But the fewer people who knew, the safer everyone would be. "Just thinking about new recipes we could try," she lied, "to bring in more customers." Frank nodded, though he didn't look convinced. "Just be careful, Melody. The world's not safe anymore." "I know, Grandpa," she said, kissing his forehead. "I'm always careful." But as she got ready for bed, Melody wondered if being careful was enough anymore. Something was changing. She could feel it, and whatever happened next would be anything but safe. The next day brought steady rain, drumming on the diner's roof. Few customers came in. Melody spent most of the morning cleaning already clean surfaces and watching the clock. At noon, the door opened. A human entered, shaking water from his coat. Melody had never seen him before. He was young, maybe 30, with light brown hair and tired eyes. "Coffee, please," he said, sitting at the counter, "and whatever food you can spare." Melody poured coffee and went to the kitchen to tell Frank they had a customer. When she returned, the man was looking around the diner carefully. "Passing through?" Melody asked, setting down a plate with a small sandwich. "Supply run," the man answered. "I'm headed back to Great Falls tomorrow." He took a bite of the sandwich. "I'm Sam, by the way." Melody. She didn't ask more questions. These days, people kept to themselves. Sam ate quickly, but his eyes kept moving, watching the door, the windows, the kitchen entrance. When Frank came out to check on things, Sam straightened slightly. "Good sandwich," Sam said. "Your bread is fresher than what we get in Great Falls." "We make it ourselves," Frank said proudly. "Got a small garden out back for herbs too," Sam nodded and finished his coffee. As he paid, he slid a small folded paper across the counter to Melody. "For later," he whispered. Then he was gone, back into the rain. Melody slipped the paper into her pocket without looking at it. Her heart beat faster. Messages passed this way usually came from the resistance, humans working against the Vraxians from hidden places. She had heard stories but never been involved herself. The afternoon dragged on. At 3 o'clock, Lieutenant Krev arrived, right on time. Today, the Vraxian carried a small black bag. "Good afternoon," Melody said, following their now familiar routine. "The usual soup?" "Yes, thank you," Krev said, sitting in the same booth. When Melody brought the soup, the diner was empty again. Krev motioned for her to sit. Once she did, the Vraxian reached into the bag and pulled out a small metal object shaped like a curved shell. "This is old," Krev said quietly. "From before our space travel time. A sound artifact from our ancient temples." Melody looked at the object with interest. "What does it do?" "It makes patterns. Sacred patterns." Krev held the shell-like object carefully. "Our leaders forbid these now. Say they make us weak. But some researchers keep them for study." "Can you show me?" Melody asked. Krev looked around to make sure they were alone, then pressed the edge of the shell to his lips. He blew very softly, moving his long fingers over tiny holes in the surface. A whisper of sound emerged, a series of rising and falling, tones that reminded Melody of wind through trees. When Krev stopped, Melody felt goosebumps on her arms. "That's beautiful," she whispered. "This was used in healing ceremonies," Krev explained. "Before we used sound as weapons, the patterns were believed to restore balance in sick bodies." "It sounds like our music," Melody said. "The way the sounds rise and fall together." Krev's eyes widened slightly. "This is not possible. Our species evolved on different worlds. But maybe sound itself works the same everywhere," Melody suggested. "Maybe there are natural patterns that all living things respond to." Krev put the shell away carefully. "I must study this more. The commanders would not like such theories." Melody reached into her pocket and felt the folded note from Sam. She had not read it yet. But something told her these meetings with Krev might be important beyond just sharing music. "I have something to show you tonight," she said. "Not just humming. Real music." "I will come at the same time," Krev agreed. The rest of the day passed slowly. Melody found a moment alone to read Sam's note in the bathroom. The message was simple. "Resistance needs inside info on Vraxian sound sensitivity. Can you help? Back tomorrow for answer." Melody's hands trembled as she flushed the note down the toilet. The Resistance wanted her to spy on Krev. The very idea scared her. But if the Resistance was planning something against the Vraxians, maybe it could free Earth. Maybe humans could have music again, but Krev had been kind to her. The Vraxian was different from the others, curious instead of cold. The thought of betraying that trust made Melody feel sick. At closing time, Frank complained of a headache and went upstairs early again. Melody cleaned up slowly, thinking about what to do. When Krev knocked at the back door at 9, she still hadn't decided. "Come in," she whispered, letting the Vraxian inside. Tonight she led Krev to the storage room. Hidden behind bags of flour and sugar was a small box. Melody pulled it out carefully and opened it. Inside lay her grandmother's old wooden flute. "This is not just humming," she explained. "This makes music on its own. We call it a flute." Krev looked at the instrument with interest. "It makes sound when you blow into it?" "Yes. Like your shell, but louder." "I'll play very softly." Melody put the flute to her lips. It had been years since she played, but her fingers remembered the positions. She began a slow, gentle melody, a lullaby her grandmother used to play for her. The sound was thin and quiet in the small room, but it filled the space with sweetness. Melody closed her eyes, letting the music flow through her. For a moment, she forgot about Vraxians and resistance and danger. There was only the song. When she stopped and opened her eyes, she saw something shocking. Krev was making a strange movement. The Vraxian's shoulders shook slightly, and clear liquid ran from the corners of those large eyes. "Are you okay?" Melody asked, alarmed. "Did it hurt you?" "No hurt," Krev said, voice strange. "Feeling. Too much feeling." With surprise, Melody realized what was happening. "You're crying," she said. That's what we call it when emotions make water come from our eyes. Vraxians do not cry, Krev said, wiping the moisture away. This is new. The alien seemed troubled. Your music causes physical changes in me. This could be dangerous. Or it could be important, Melody said. If music affects Vraxians like this, maybe it could change things between our species. Krev touched the flute gently. May I try? Melody showed Krev how to hold the flute and where to place his long fingers. The Vraxian tried to blow into it, but the sound came out harsh and squeaky. They both winced. Sorry, Krev said. Our mouths are shaped differently. It's okay, it takes practice. Melody took the flute back and played a few more notes before putting it away. I need to tell you something, she said suddenly, making up her mind. Someone from the human resistance came today. They want information about Vraxian hearing. Krev went very still. You will give them this information? I don't know, Melody admitted. I want Earth to be free again. I want music back in people's lives. But I don't want to hurt you. The resistance plans to use sound weapons against us, Krev said. It wasn't a question. Probably. But I could help them find sounds that don't cause pain. Just temporary confusion, maybe. Like your crying reaction. Krev was quiet for a long time. Finally, the Vraxian spoke. I will help you, but not to hurt my people. To find a better way for both species. Melody stared at Krev in surprise. You would betray your commanders? They have betrayed the true Vraxian way already, Krev said. The old ways valued harmony, not conquest. I believe your music shows a path back to that truth. Melody felt hope rising in her chest. Maybe there was a way forward that didn't require more violence. Tomorrow, she said. The resistance contact will return. We can tell him we have a Vraxian ally. As they said goodbye that night, Melody realized something had shifted between them. They were no longer just a human and a Vraxian curious about each other. They were now partners in something dangerous and important. Something that might change everything. The next morning, Melody woke with a strange mix of hope and fear. She had made a big choice by telling Krev about the resistance. Now she couldn't go back. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to help Frank open the diner. You're up early, Frank said, eyeing her with concern. Everything okay? Just couldn't sleep, Melody replied, avoiding his eyes as she filled salt shakers. Frank watched her for a moment longer. That Vraxian officer has been coming in a lot. Melody's heart jumped. Just likes our soup, I guess. Be careful, Melody. Getting friendly with them is dangerous. I'm just being polite to a customer, Grandpa, she said, trying to sound normal. It's good for business. Frank didn't look convinced but dropped the subject. The morning passed slowly. Melody kept watching the door, waiting for Sam to return. She wondered what he would say when she told him about Krev. Would he think she was a traitor for trusting a Vraxian? At noon, Sam arrived, wearing the same coat as yesterday. He ordered coffee and a sandwich again, saying nothing special until Frank went back to the kitchen. Did you think about my question? Sam asked quietly, looking into his coffee cup. Yes, Melody said, wiping the counter near him. But I need to tell you something first. I have a contact, someone who might help us. Sam's eyes narrowed. What kind of contact? A Vraxian, one who doesn't agree with what their leaders are doing. Sam's face hardened. Are you crazy? You can't trust them. This one is different, Melody insisted. Krev has been studying our music, learning how it affects Vraxians differently than their leaders claim. It's a trick, Sam said flatly. They're using you to find out what we're planning. No. I've seen how our music affects Krev. It caused crying, not pain. And Krev showed me that Vraxians used to use sound for healing before they turned it into weapons. Sam looked around the empty diner nervously. Even if that's true, one friendly alien doesn't change anything. We need to fight back. But what if we don't have to fight? Melody leaned closer. What if we could find sounds that affect them without hurting them? That could stop them without killing. Sam was quiet for a moment, thinking. The Resistance would still want that information, but they won't trust a Vraxian. Then trust me, Melody said. Krev is coming today at 3. Meet us at the back door at 9 tonight. Hear what Krev has to say before you decide. Sam finished his coffee slowly. This is dangerous. If you're wrong about this Vraxian, we could all be arrested. I know, but what if I'm right? What if we could end this without more violence? Finally, Sam nodded. 9 o'clock. But I'm bringing someone with me. And if anything seems wrong, we're gone. After Sam left, Melody felt sick with worry. She had put a lot of trust in Krev. What if Sam was right and it was all a trick? The afternoon dragged on. When Lieutenant Krev arrived at 3, Melody felt both relief and new worry. The Vraxian seemed the same as always, ordering soup and sitting in the same booth. When she brought the soup, Melody spoke quietly. The Resistance contact will come tonight. He's bringing someone else too. Krev's eyes widened slightly. This is dangerous. More humans means more chance of discovery. I know, but they don't trust me working with a Vraxian. They need to meet you themselves. Krev was quiet for a moment. Very well, but we must be careful. If my commanders learn of this, we will all be punished. 9 o'clock at the back door, Melody said, then returned to work. The rest of the day passed in tense waiting. At closing time, Frank seemed to sense something was wrong. You've been acting strange all day, he said as they cleaned up. Tell me what's going on, Melody. She thought about telling him everything, but the less he knew, the safer he would be. Just tired, Grandpa, and worried about the diner. We don't get many customers anymore. Frank didn't believe her, she could tell, but he just sighed. I'm going upstairs to listen to the news broadcast. Don't stay up too late. Once Frank was upstairs, Melody checked that everything was ready. She had her grandmother's flute hidden in her apron pocket. She unlocked the back door and waited. Krev arrived first, slipping inside like a shadow. Are they here yet? Not yet, Melody whispered. They'll come soon. They waited in tense silence. At 10 minutes past 9, there was a soft knock. Melody opened the door to find Sam with a woman she didn't know. The woman was older, maybe 50, with short gray hair and sharp eyes. This is Diane, Sam said simply. She's with the Resistance too. Diane's eyes widened when she saw Krev, her hand moving to her pocket where Melody guessed she had a weapon. It's okay, Melody said quickly. This is Lieutenant Krev, the one I told you about. They moved to the storage room where they could talk without being seen from any windows. The tension in the small space was thick enough to touch. Why would a Vraxian help humans? Diane asked bluntly. Because the commanders have forgotten our true ways, Krev said. They use sound only for war now. But once, we used it for healing and understanding. Show them, Melody suggested. Krev took out the shell-like instrument and played the same gentle pattern as before. The soft, wavering notes filled the small room. Melody watched Sam and Diane's faces. Sam looked suspicious still, but Diane's expression had changed to surprise. That sounds like an old Earth pentatonic scale, Diane said when Krev finished. How is that possible? Sound follows universal patterns, Krev explained. The same. Frequencies that heal or harm exist everywhere. My people turn these patterns into weapons, but they can be more. We need to know which sounds affect Vraxians and how, Sam said. For defense. I can tell you this, Krev said, but you must promise to use it for blocking, not hurting. The Resistance must find a better way than just reversing who controls the weapons. Diane studied Krev carefully. You really believe humans and Vraxians could live together peacefully? Yes. With understanding. The way was lost when our military leaders took control. Melody took out her flute. Watch what happens when I play. She began a soft melody, keeping her eyes on Krev. Within moments, the Vraxian's eyes showed moisture again, the strange crying reaction returning. What's happening to it? Sam asked, alarmed. Him, Melody corrected. Krev is feeling emotions from the music, like we do. Impossible, Diane whispered, but her eyes showed she believed what she was seeing. Melody stopped playing. Krev can tell you which sound patterns affect different Vraxian castes. The military ones react differently than the workers or researchers. This could change everything, Diane said, thinking hard. If we could disable their command centers without hurting anyone. Their planning was interrupted by a sudden loud knock at the front door of the diner. Everyone froze. Police patrol, a harsh voice called. Open up, random inspection. Fear shot through Melody like ice. Vraxian police at the door and a Vraxian officer and resistance members in her storage room. If they were found, they would all be arrested. Or worse. The back alley, she whispered. Quickly. But as they turned to leave, bright lights shone through the small window in the storage room door. The alley was blocked too. They were trapped. Melody's heart pounded as they stood frozen in the storage room. The knocking at the front door grew louder. Hide, Krev whispered urgently. I will talk to them. They'll search the whole place, Sam said. We need another way. Melody's mind raced. Then she remembered something her grandfather had once mentioned. The old freezer, she whispered. Behind those shelves. It doesn't work anymore, but Grandpa never removed it. She pushed aside boxes, revealing a heavy metal door built into the wall. It was just big enough for people to squeeze inside. Get in, she told Sam and Diane. Hurry. The resistance members didn't argue. They slipped into the dark space and pulled the door mostly closed, leaving just a small crack to breathe through. What about you? Krev asked Melody. I have to answer the door. They'll be suspicious if no one does. She took a deep breath. Tell them you came for food after hours, that I made an exception because you're an officer. The knocking turned to pounding. Final warning, open this door. Go to the back room, Melody told Krev. Act normal. She hurried to the front door, trying to calm her breathing. She unlocked it to find 3 Vraxian police officers, their black uniforms different from Krev's research division gray. Sorry, Melody said, trying to sound sleepy. I was in the back. We're closed for the night. The lead officer pushed past her. Random inspection. All buildings in this sector. Melody's hands shook slightly. My grandfather is sleeping upstairs. Please, don't disturb him. The officer ignored her. 2 of them began searching the diner while the leader questioned her. Why are you still here after closing? Cleaning, Melody said. We have to keep everything spotless. The officer leaned closer. We received reports of unusual sounds from this location, multiple human voices, possibly music. Melody felt cold. Fear spread through her body. Someone had reported them. I don't know anything about that, she managed to say. One of the searchers called from the back. Sir, Lieutenant Krev is here. The lead officer frowned and walked to the back room. Melody followed, heart pounding. Krev stood calmly beside a table, looking perfectly official. Lieutenant, the police officer said, sounding surprised. What are you doing here? Research, Krev said flatly. This establishment is part of my human behavior study. After hours, without proper documentation? My work requires observation at different times. The paperwork will be filed tomorrow. Krev's voice was cold and commanding. Does your patrol question the methods of the research division now? The police officer hesitated. No, Lieutenant, but we had reports of unusual sounds. From me, Krev said. I was asking the human to demonstrate normal cleaning activities. Sound levels were within allowed limits. While they talked, Melody noticed one of the other officers moving toward the storage room, toward the hidden freezer. She had to do something. Without thinking, Melody knocked over a stack of plates. They crashed to the floor with a terrible noise. All the Vraxians flinched at the sound, covering their sensitive ears. Sorry, Melody cried. It was an accident. The lead officer glared at her, then turned back to Krev. Your research subject is disruptive. Perhaps we should take her in for questioning. That would interfere with my work, Krev said. I will. Handle any discipline needed. The 2 Vraxians stared at each other, A silent battle of rank happening between them. Finally, the police officer looked away. Very well, Lieutenant, but I will report this irregular research practice to command. As is your duty, Krev said calmly. Are we finished here? The lead officer signaled to the others. They moved toward the door, the storage room thankfully forgotten after the noise distraction. But as they reached the front door, it opened from the outside. Another Vraxian entered. This one wore a uniform with more badges and symbols than Melody had ever seen. Everyone, including Krev, stiffened to attention. Commander Zecht, the police officer said, we didn't know you were in this sector. The commander was taller than the others, with darker gray skin and cold eyes. I go where I please, he said. What is happening here? Random inspection, sir. We found Lieutenant Krev conducting research. Commander Zecht's eyes narrowed as he looked at Krev. Research? At this hour? How interesting. Krev stepped forward. Human behavior study, Commander. Authorized by the Science Division. Is that so? Zecht walked slowly around the diner, looking at everything. And what have you learned from your research? Melody saw something dangerous in the commander's eyes. He didn't believe Krev. This was bad. Zecht stopped suddenly, his head tilting. What does that sound? Everyone went silent. At first, Melody heard nothing, then she caught it. A faint scraping noise coming from the storage room. Someone was moving in the freezer. Just the building settling, she said quickly. It's old. Commander. Zecht ignored her, moving toward the sound. Search that room again, he ordered the police. Melody looked desperately at Krev. They were out of options. In seconds, Sam and Diane would be found. Then Krev did something unexpected. The lieutenant reached into a pocket and pulled out the shell instrument. Before anyone could stop him, he put it to his lips and blew, not softly like before, but hard and loud. The sound that came out wasn't gentle or beautiful. It was sharp and piercing, a wailing screech that filled the diner. All the Vraxians, including Zecht, doubled over in pain, covering their ears. Run! Krev shouted to Melody over the noise. Get them out! Melody raced to the storage room. She yanked open the freezer door, pulling Sam and Diane out. Go, through the kitchen back door. The resistance members didn't need to be told twice. They ran for the exit, while the Vraxians were still confused by the painful sound. Melody turned, back for Krev, but the lieutenant was surrounded by the police officers who were recovering despite the noise. Commander Zecht had grabbed Krev's arm, stopping the sound. Traitor, the commander hissed. You will explain this to the high command. Go, Krev shouted again to Melody. Tell them what we learned. She didn't want to leave him, but staying would waste his sacrifice. Melody ran to the kitchen and out the back door, catching up with Sam and Diane in the alley. What happened? Sam asked as they ran. Krev saved us, Melody said, fighting back tears. Used sound against his own people. They didn't stop running until they reached an old warehouse several blocks away. Inside, more resistance members waited with equipment and maps. Did you get what we needed? A man asked Diane. More than we hoped for, Diane said. She looked at Melody with new respect, thanks to her and a Vraxian who believed in peace. Melody felt empty inside. Krev would be punished terribly for helping them. We have to save him, she said. He risked everything. First things first, Sam said gently. We need to get you somewhere safe. The Vraxians will be looking for you now. Diane nodded. And we need to use what Krev told us to make non-lethal sound devices. If we're going to free Earth without more killing, we have to work fast. Melody took her grandmother's flute from her pocket. It had survived the escape. She held it tightly, thinking of Krev and the strange tears the music had caused. I'm not just going to hide, she told them firmly. I'm going to help rescue Krev, and then we're going to show both humans and Vraxians that music isn't a weapon. It's a bridge between us. Diane smiled slightly. A waitress and a flute against an alien empire sounds impossible. Maybe, Melody said, looking down at the simple wooden instrument in her hands. But music has always done the impossible. It makes us feel things we can't explain. It connects us in ways words can't. And now we know it affects Vraxians too. Resistance members looked at each other, then back at Melody. "Where do we start?" Sam asked. Melody took a deep breath. "We start with a song, one that will open the door to Krev's prison cell, and then, maybe, open the hearts of two species who forgot how to listen to each other." Outside, dawn was breaking, over the silent earth. But soon, Melody promised herself, the world would be filled with music again, not as a weapon, but as the salvation it was always meant to be.